Oi!
What?
Oi! Down here.
Oh,
Why don't you paint more dwarves?
I mean, I just...
You don't like short people?
No, it's not that.
I could hack you off at the knees, boy.
Welcome to 52 Miniatures, everybody. Yes, today we're painting dwarves.
Why, they better be good looking too, you speciest. This is Mounthaven, the mighty dwarves for Warcrow by Corvus Belli. Sponsors of this video. These are the best looking dwarves I've seen in a long time. Of course they are! Yeah. I've been anticipating these models. Warcrow miniatures are pretty much all great looking, but I've been missing the dwarven faction. Until now, that is. But this turned into a problem. I don't know if you've ever had this, but sometimes when I get models in my hand that look great, that I feel are kind of special, I can get a block. Like painter's block. I don't know where to start leads to I don't want to start. No proper stamina in humans. That's what I always said. Yeah, thanks. But seriously, I've got a complete creative juice flow problem. I mean, I don't even have the fruit. The box art kind of gives me a hard time with its very good looks. Instagram, well, let's not start there. There's just been a golden demon on, and all I see is inhuman levels of technical skill. There's always classical art and color theory books and, well, other distressing options. The more I think on it, the further away from painting I get. What you need, lad, is a good day down a shaft. Just a pickaxe, a pork belly sandwich for lunch, and yourself for company. You might find the gold, or not, but it won't matter because you're doing something you like. And there's pork. I always said, when you don't know the way forward, take a step back. Do something you know you like that involves pork. And next morning you'll be right as rain, feeling like chopping an elf in the knees, nice and proper. Now pick up the bloody brush or lose the finger. I think you might be right. So I decided to paint like I used to paint, taking a step back. It's not standard miniature painting, but I like it. It's my shaft and my pickaxe, and I guess my pork sandwich. What I need first is a light sketch. I realized when filming these great plastic miniatures, I mean, look at this. Corvus Belli calls it Unicool, I think. It's so crisp. I've only seen it on some Warcrow and Infinity models, but here, the entire Mounthaven action pack and the Hearth Guards are like this. Great stuff. Anyway, I noticed the light here and thought it would be very cool if the painted miniatures sort of looked like this. I took some pictures for reference. Can be great to have when painting, but it's not enough for me to actually paint from. The best thing I could think of was to spray on layers of paint that mimic what I want. I primed the models that I wanted to paint black, and then sketched out a color scheme on my computer using one of the pictures I took. There's a few ideas, but I got the best vibe from the sort of green, yellow, and orange scheme. So I first sprayed the miniature green from above, and then used an ice yellow and lightly sprayed from straight above the miniature and from one side. This seemed to be just about the angle of light that I was after. A rather moody and pretty good representation of how I want the miniatures to look in the end, but a sort of black and white version. I used green and ice yellow rather than just black and white, as I think these slight tints of color could be a better foundation for my planned color scheme. I'm then complicating life by using only a small set of single pigment chimera paints, plus a black gouache paint. I'm not doing this to confuse you, but because it inspires me, and I need that right now. I have a magenta, a cold and warm yellow, a yellow oxide, a white, the black, and then a blue. So there's no green. But a great way to get green is mixing yellow and black, especially ivory black. Yeah, I know, there's different types of black. We're down the shaft, remember? The muted green that this mix creates can be vibrated up by adding a little blue. It can be shaded down to sort of a brown realm by using a tad of magenta, highlighted with a bit more yellow and white, or shaded with more blue, and so on. This does sound like one of those distressing theory books, and I'm sorry about that. But I tried to find that kind of heavy, deep, kelpy green with dark, almost magenta shadows and desaturated pale highlights. Using paint like this is not a necessity. There isn't any good, bad, or ugly. The reason we have all the little bottles of paint is so that we don't have to do this. I seldom use only single pigment paints, but in my shaft, with my pickaxe, I just like seeing the different colors pass by on the palette. It kind of helps me think, or not think. I then try to replicate the highlights and the shadows that were sprayed on the model, but with this colored paint. And I do it with wet blending, mixing the paint on the model while it's wet. This is one of the raiders, kind of like shock troops, with sort of hydraulic boots. That means the short dwarf can get uncomfortably high up, like neck territory. Also, throwing axes that, because of fantasy magic, reappears in the wielder's hand. Anyway, wet blending is something I set out to learn like when I got back into painting years ago. I watched a video by Tabletop Minions with Sam Lenz in it explaining the technique, and I just loved the style. This is painting at its best in Shaft 52, kind of like my comfort food.
Ah, like that pork belly sandwich with mustard that singes your beard and makes you weep.
Yes, I guess. But on the subject of mustard, that is kind of the yellow that I'm after. I don't want to call this gold. Instead, I'm calling it yellow, and that means I don't have to try and make it look like non-metallic metal, gold, just yellow. Now, these layers of wet blending is something I do over the entire miniature. It's like sketching out base layers, letting me know how everything works out. I stay on the darker side of things to leave room for highlights. Now, Mounthaven dwarves, of course, live in underground cities. But because of new dangers in the dark, a lot of underground passages and roadways have become unusable, and these dwarves have started to surface, to the annoyance of all others.
I heard that.
They're not only the finest of craftsmen, armored in the toughest of alloys, armed with the sharpest blades, and create feats of engineering, they're also the keepers of history. Like all the history, even the lost stuff. And you know how it is, where with keeping a lot of records and data about people, you can kind of predict how things are going to go. Probability. So these dwarves have a plan. They've figured out how the world will change and act after a carefully written script to get out on top. Or I guess that would be down a good mine shaft. Now, I'm still working on my master plan, but this is the first sketch. All just the first wet blend. And I think it's a good representation of that light and the shadows. It is, however, lacking some real dark stuff, some definition. So I'm going to go in with some black. Now, this specific black is only something I've been experimenting with over the past year. But the black paint I'm using is a gouache paint. Gouache could be described as a sort of watercolor, and that means it reactivates with water. So even when painted on and dry, I can reactivate the paint with a brush damp in water. This is an annoyance to many miniature painters. Reactivation is considered a flaw, pretty much. Yet in this instance, I can see a lot of positives. I can darken areas down, even do tedious black lining, but when I make mistakes or want to create smoother gradients, I can go back and erase and smudge with a damp brush, taking all the pressure off. And with that, with some shadows deepened, I'm pretty happy. But there's some colors that are just not as well represented on this model, so I jumped to the next, one of the hearth guards. She's got a lot more yellow going for her, so I get to see what that would look like as a more prominent part of the model. Hearth guards are like classic sturdy axe and shield combatants, with, in this case, the best helmets I've seen in a long time. This kind of, Babylonian inspiration is good for dwarves, I say. Anyway, there's also a lot more skin on this model. And wet blending skin is probably my favorite, especially with a palette full of non-Caucasian skin tone paints. I can try and go from an almost black to a violet to a red to a brown to a warm pink to a pale pink. And I'm glad to see this works well with everything else around it. I also changed my approach to the orange, trying to go from a green to a sort of more brick orange, a lot less deep red than previously. And yes, we've entered Irish territory, but I'm a big fan of some of their beverages, so that's okay for now.
Now that's the first truth you've spoken so far, lad.
Yeah. As I also don't know my master plan that well, as the Mounthaven dwarves do, I'd, despite historic evidence, forgotten about Easter. And that means school holidays. So I brought the minis and the paint home with me to continue. A small perk of using a limited set of paints is how well they travel. Now I wanted to explore the green a bit more, maybe make it less green and move a bit more towards the pale. We're deep in shaft exploration here, but again, honestly, this kind of stuff just keeps me in my happy place. The keeper of the sacred fire, kind of like a healer warrior, was up for the task. So I set out to just try and refine all the different colors, trying to sort of create a final proof for the rest, even though doing that without premixed paints is honestly a bit of a headache. Also introducing pink for no good reason. I just felt like I wanted to add pink. To step back, what I think I'm, in general, in this video trying to describe is that I don't think we need to necessarily know where we're going when we start out, present dwarves exempted. Models can be painted without a set-in-stone plan, and this can help. It can be a way to keep painting. Moving on can change things. Trying something different can create a spark. And alterations and new ideas is something that keeps me interested and at the painting desk. By introducing a limited set of paints and a different painting technique, I kind of force myself into this space. We stem from a world of tutorials that by nature is a kind of set-in-stone way, explaining how things should or are done. It builds expectations to always know from the start how to reach the perceived end. I've even done it myself in this video because I have an inherent vision of how mini painting videos should be, step by step, start to finish. But honestly, I have no idea really. This is miniature number 3 that is sketching and working on a loose idea of color and light. But I just had to start grasping at some hairs to get that first paint on before finding my way. And it feels like this is pretty much where I want to be. So I save my wet palette paper of the base colors and mixes painted on the keeper. Dry, it can serve as a bit of a proof of what I've been doing. And I decided to finish this mini completely. Final highlights really add the definition that my wet blend lacks, bringing out the details of these cool sculpts.
Well, thank you. You're carved pretty well for a human, too.
Okay. Thanks, I guess. What I like to do is not only sort of the edge style highlights, but scratch them about quite a bit so that the highlights I add also create textures, like scratches in leather, wear on armor, that kind of stuff. And this is so much fun. When things kind of come together, it's like, oh, this is why I enjoy miniature painting. A great feeling to finally have back. My 2 last models are Olga, the Princess of Mounthaven, and a folder. Both great. The ingeniousness of Olga's sideburns and the general aura of the folder just make me happy. And these 2 are special. Olga is, after all, the big boss. She needs a different look. And the folder, folding her thin sheets of the magical metal orichalcum that invokes magical spirits, like magic origami, has a great big magic bear spirit happening, and that also needs a different look. So I went for blue this time as the major color, a bit more of a saturated sea blue that looks like it will work out fine with the previous choice of colors. And then I cracked on. Painting the folder was great, as there's some softer shapes, not just the 2 obvious ones, but the hair and the bear spirit. This all felt refreshing after all the hard-shaped armor on the others. The scheme changed ever so slightly along the way. I introduced a sort of pinkish brown or grey as well, for leather as well as the rocks that many of these minis are standing on. It kind of pulled the massive miniatures together and took things a little away from St. Patrick's Day territory. Now, what do you think?
Well, I mean, you took your sweet time, and all that yabbering. My ears hurt, and they're used to the sound of steel hitting stone. Or elf. You could have just slapped on some gold paint and got on with your life. I mean, you wouldn't even make it down the shaft to find gold. You'd still be stuck at the entrance, staring at the gravel path, saying something like, "Oh, looky here at all the wonderful colours of the dirt. I wonder if it would make me feel better if I tried to talk about it in a nuanced way to strangers on the internet for half an hour in complicated ways. Ah, you need to get a real job, matey." But the pink was nice, a bit like ham, and I like ham.
Thank you, I guess. I'm glad I actually got some paint on these great minis. I'm over the hump a little bit and can keep working on the rest. Now, the Mounthaven, they're now out of the mine. I think they're very cool indeed, and as I think of all Warcrow minis, these are great fantasy miniatures. Warcrow is a fun game, but the minis work for more than that. Regardless, the Mounthaven action pack contains 10 miniatures as well as stat cards and a narrative campaign booklet for Warcrow. Check the link down below in the description for details and more Warcrow stuff. There's a lot more Mounthaven to come. I'm very excited to see what the future coming releases will look like. So hopefully the dwarves will be back. Please like and subscribe, and do check out my Patreon to support the channel long term. A little goes a long way, and it would be fun to keep this up. Also, look me up on Twitch for weekly, regular hobby live streams. See you in the next one. Bye.
Aye, you better come back, or I'll chop your knees off.